The LA Rams have the lowest pressure rate in the entire NFL, but who can they add at the NFL trade deadline to change that? Find out now. All right, welcome back in, folks. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoy this video. Let's dive into it. We are talking edge defenders this time around. Yesterday, we dropped the offensive line video that brought up a bunch of offensive line options. I believe 13 of them. This is going to be very much the same, but it's going to look at the edge defenders, edge rushers, if you will. The Rams, as I mentioned, have the lowest pressure rate in the NFL, and it's not relatively close. So something has to give here. Aaron Donald is 7th among the NFL in pass rush win rate per PFF. Greg Gaines is 75th. Leonard Floyd is 81st. You have A'Shawn Robinson at 104th, Terrell Lewis at 107th, and Justin Hollins at 115th. The bottom line is this isn't good enough, and it's not conducive to winning another Super Bowl. So last year around this time, the Rams went out and they got Von Miller. They spent a second and a third round draft pick, and I do think that there's a chance that they could do that again. But the question is, for who? We're going to get into it. We're starting off with Cameron Jordan of the New Orleans Saints here. I'm going to say this is more of the least likely. I'm going to give this a 5% chance of happening. I think Cameron Jordan also really doesn't want to be a Ram. He's been very adamant that the Rams kind of screwed him out of a potential Super Bowl, as everyone has pointed out in the NFC title game. So I don't think the sour grapes are gone with him, but if they are, and the Saints are willing to trade him away, the 33-year-old who's a 7-time Pro Bowler and an All-Pro in his own right, he signed until 2024. I don't love the deal. The Saints would definitely have to take on some serious load on that contract. It's a 17.5 annual average value, so there's something there to be said. He's 6'4", he's 287 pounds, so I wouldn't say he necessarily fits the scheme either. He's not going to be an outside linebacker. He'd be more of a defensive end, or a giant outside linebacker. I don't know if that really makes a lot of sense for the scheme fit. I don't like I said, I don't think he's the biggest fit, but he has started 182 games. He has 111 and a half sacks in his career. He's a veteran presence, still playing at a high level. And I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to happen because I think this guy wants to retire a Saint. They're 2-5. They don't look very good. But if he were to be traded, what could the Rams get for him? I'm thinking a 2023 6th round pick and a 2024 4th round pick. Look, it's not going to be a ton there, but I think what you get is this is a guy with a hefty deal that, the Saints are going to have to take on. He's 33 years old. He's playing at a high level, but there are other guys that are going to go for higher values. So I don't even know if the Saints would bother making this trade, but that's where we're at with Cameron Jordan. Moving on, we have Ben BANOGU of the Indianapolis Colts, a 26-year-old. He's signed until 2023, 6'3", 252. He has started 0 games in his career. He's played in 41. He's been used as really a situational pass rusher and only has 2.5 sacks. He would be a rental and he would be a rotational piece. So when you look at Cameron Jordan at 5% chance that I'm giving the Rams to grab Cameron Jordan, he's somebody that could start. I don't know how they would figure it out, but they would be able to figure it out. If they got him, he's a starter. When you look at BANOGU, this is a guy who's going to be a depth piece. Probably isn't going to start over Justin Hollins, isn't going to be a needle mover at all. This is a guy you pick up if you're going to get another guy. This is not the guy to pick up to solve any issues, but if they feel like they need a better version of Takk McKinley, going out and getting guys, because they let McKinley go. If they want to go out and get another guy, I think Ben BANOGU does make some sense. I'm going to give it a 15% chance. I don't know if the Rams will be interested. I have a 2024 6th as the price there. Not really expensive at all. The Rams do not have a 2024 7th because that went to the Broncos in the trade for Kenny Young. They also got the 6th rounder in return. So that 6th rounder would be sent over for Ben BANOGU in this circumstance. The 3-3-1 Indianapolis Colts definitely are in the mix to trade away a player, because at the end of the day, this is a team that's now starting Sam Ehlinger the rest of the year. They've basically pulled the plug on Matt Ryan. He is not the sole issue of the team. They have no run game to speak of. The offensive line is struggling. They just don't look like a good football team. So we'll get to it a little bit down the road at the end of this video, but the Colts, I think, could be sellers at the deadline, to say the least. We move on to a Dallas Cowboy that no one has been able to really talk about because he's been out, and that is TARELL BASHAM for the Cowboys. They're 5-2. I understand why would they trade a pass rusher, because they're loaded, okay? And TARELL BASHAM, at the end of the day, it has not been on this team. He's been on IR. He just got activated in the 21-day window to return. He's 28 years old. His contract expires at the end of the year. Why not get something for him, right? He's 6'4". He's 266 pounds, 18 career starts, 11 career sacks. And I just feel like this is a guy that would be more of a depth piece, kind of the same vein as I mentioned with BANOGU. You're talking about a guy that probably isn't starting over Hollins or, Lewis, whoever. But I think he offers, some decent depth there, 20% chance. I'm going to give the Rams that they trade for him. We move on to another guy who I think is a 20% chance, and that is Frank Clark of the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the worst trades in the history of this league at this position, I thought, was Frank Clark. The Seahawks have absolutely fleeced the Kansas City Chiefs for this deal. I don't think it's worked out well for the Chiefs. I don't think Frank Clark is bad. I just don't think he was worth what they gave up. But Kansas City would obviously look at the other way. They won a Super Bowl, yada, yada, whatever. They're 5-2. Clark is going to get suspended 2 games due to the personal conduct policy for the NFL. So that's something to consider. I think he could be on the block regardless. He's 29 years old. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He's really not played all that well the last couple of years. 6'3", 261, probably looking for a change of scenery at this point. He's signed until 2024 with a pretty easy deal to get out of, in my opinion. I just feel like he had a lot of success with Seattle, but it just hasn't been there with the Chiefs. Hasn't done what he's normally done, what he's accustomed to. So I think that's important there to bring up. This would be a change of scenery going to the Rams. And I think no doubt about it, you get a Frank Clark. I think the name himself, I think you get him an opportunity to eventually become the starter alongside Leonard Floyd. This would be the Rams going with more of a cheaper fix. This is not a depth piece per se. I think he would eventually start if the Rams went out and got Frank Clark from the Chiefs. So this would not be a depth piece. I think this would be a guy that could start for a cheaper deal. 2023 6, I think, is what it would take. He's got 80 career starts in the league. He's got 56.5 sacks. And like I said, he is suspended those 2 games, so that's something that could come into play. But I do feel like, he could be readily available, and he could thrive with a much-needed change of scenery playing alongside Aaron Donald. So 20% chance of that happening. I'm not, super sold on any of the players I've already mentioned. I like Cameron Jordan, but so far, none of the players I mentioned I would go and trade for. Frank Clark, I guess with the cheap option there, but I don't even know if I would do that. So just showing you all of the options the Rams have, but I'm not exactly thrilled with the ones so far. 20% chance for Frank Clark. Moving on, we have Lorenzo Carter for the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons find themselves at 3-4, a team that has been in just about every game except for the one that we just saw last week against the Bengals. And Lorenzo Carter is on a 1-year prove-it deal that will expire at the end of the year. He will be a free agent. He's 26 years old. He'll be 27 in a month or so. He's 6'5", 255, plays the position well, 40 career starts, 17 sacks. He didn't have a great career with the Giants, but towards the end, you could definitely see he was somewhat coming on, and I think he's had a pretty solid year for the Falcons, made an impact in that Rams game against them. I just think at the end of the day, the Falcons are in a good spot. They don't need to trade Carter, but I've seen rumors about him being traded. Since he's on an expiring deal, and since they have draft picks that they could actually get going. I mean, you talk about getting D'Angelo Malone in the third. You have Ogundeji and Ebiketie. I think either of those guys could take over, obviously with more reps and everything. So I think there's definitely something there. If the Rams really like having another Georgia guy alongside the other Georgia guy and Leonard Floyd, then maybe they'll make this deal. And I think, they could offer enough where it might entice the Falcons to be like, all right, we're in this, but we're not really going to win a Super Bowl with this team. We're competitive, but maybe let's look towards next year and grab some picks here. 2 2023 6th round picks. The Rams have 2 of them. I think that would be understandable to acquire a guy like Lorenzo Carter. If he was on a longer term deal, this might be a little bit more expensive, but I think because of the deal itself, I think the Rams have an opportunity to kind of, get away with a little bit of a steal here if they find him to be a good fit. Moving on, and oh, by the way, that's 25% I have for him. Moving on, we have the biggest name out of anybody that I've already mentioned, and that is Montez Sweat, who I previously mentioned on the channel before the season started as an option for the Rams. Sweat is unbelievable. He is continuing to get better. He is an elite run defender. I mean, the guy is just really developed, and I don't know, I'll say this right now, I don't know why on God's green earth that the Commanders would even trade him, would even entertain an offer for him. And I'll say the same thing when we get to some other pass rushers, as you know. But at the same time, they're considering trading Daron Payne. So if they decide not to trade Daron Payne and they decide to pay him and not pay Montez, then I guess they'll trade Montez. I don't know. I don't really see it, though. He's 26 years old. He's signed until 2024. The rumors were spreading during the offseason, but he's only elevated his play even more. He's an athletic freak at 6'6", 262 pounds, running a 4.5 40. You have 49 career starts. You have 24 sacks, and that's not even his bread and butter. I feel like he's getting better as a pass rusher. He's got unbelievable traits, and it makes him just an unbelievable run defender. If the Rams could get this guy, he would be a cornerstone piece, no doubt about it. It would be kind of a more poor man's Brian Burns, but I don't even know if that's fair to say because I think Montez Sweat has turned himself into a guy that's on that tier. You look at, he's a top 20 guy according to PFF. And, I just think at the end of the day, this is somebody that would shore up that defense, which is already playing well, but I think this would be a massive put the league on notice type of deal. I think the Rams could get him potentially with a 2023 second and a 2024 third. You probably wouldn't be able to give up a first rounder for him. I think there are better talents out there that might bite on a first round pick. So Montez Sweat, not quite there, but I think the value is there for Sweat. I think a second, this upcoming draft and a third in 2024 to move on from a guy that, was signed until 2024. You'd have him 2 years if you're the Rams, not entire full 2 years, but you get it. So, I think that'd be a big deal. And I think the Rams would consider a deal like this. I think they'll definitely call about it. I give it a 25% chance of happening. I think this is a needle mover. So if the Rams really want to make an impact, Les Snead said after they won the Super Bowl, we're going to F them picks. We're going to go and use them to, win more Super Bowls. That'd be a way to do it, going out and getting Montez Sweat, who is rumored, potentially could be available during the offseason. I mentioned that the Rams should consider that. Moving on. We have a guy who's a model of consistency, who does not get enough respect, and has been playing this game for a while. He's 34 years old. His name is Jerry Hughes, and he is the edge defender for the Texans, a true leader in that locker room. Even though they're 1-4-1, they continue to fight hard, and it's because you have people like that on the roster. At 34 years old, they did sign him to a 2-year deal. His contract won't end until 2024. It's also really easy to get out of, only $5 million per year. He's 6'2", 250. He has 140 starts in his career, 62 sacks. He's one of the older veteran leaders that I think could be a spark plug for this team that is in desperate need of pass rush. And I think when you look at it, this is somebody in Hughes that, he's playing on a team that's not going anywhere. The Texans might want to get something for him. I think a 2023 6th round pick might do the the deed. I honestly think so. So I'm going to say a 30% chance that this happens. I'm not sold on it happening, but I think Jerry Hughes is somebody that's definitely going to be, they're going to be getting calls about him. And so that's somebody to keep in mind moving forward. Another guy that is going to be somebody to keep in mind is somebody that's already been traded 3 times. He's 27 years old. He'd be a rental, 6'2", 246, 94 career starts, 59 sacks. His name is Yannick Ngakoue, and the Colts grabbed him again via trade, so it was his 3rd trade of his career. They're 3-3-1, as I already mentioned, with BANOGU. This doesn't seem like a team that's going to, actually play for a Super Bowl. So 2 2023 6th-round picks and a 2024 7th, and maybe even quarterback John Wolford if need be. I don't know. That's more kind of a joke because I don't think Sam Ehlinger is going to be much of a needle mover for the Colts. But I do think he could be had, and this could be kind of a similar instance, not the exact same instance, but kind of similar to, what Von Miller did last year. He went to a team. Von Miller wasn't playing his best football, was kind of falling out of favor of being a star, right? He had some kind of down moments, so he really had to encapsulate his former value, and I think that really allowed him, what he was able to do with the Rams allowed him to get the contract he did. Ngakoue wants to get back to where, people respect him. And, I think this is a good way to do that. You go to the Rams here, play with Aaron Donald. I think he could thrive. I just think getting that stock back up is really important to him in a contract year. He's been vocal about wanting out of situations before. So I don't think that the veterans on the team are going to take too kindly to the benching of Matt Ryan and replacing him with Sam Ehlinger, who hasn't proven anything in the NFL. I don't know. I think that there's a good chance that Ngakoue does get traded, and I think the Rams could be interested in him. He's kind of one of the bigger names, but not quite as productive as some of the bigger names right now. Still only 27. Maybe they bring him back. But I think you could get him for 2 2023 6th-round picks and a 7th round next year. And I think that's a 35% chance of happening. That's a guy to look out for. And another guy who I think is just as intriguing, and a guy that I've liked for a long time, Marcus Davenport of the New Orleans Saints. If you guys follow my draft coverage, that name out of UTSA will not surprise you in the slightest being mentioned on this channel. The Saints are 2-5. He's 26 years old. He's signed until 2023. His 5th-year option is up. They gave up 2 first-rounders to get him. And I would say it's worked out decently, but not on the level of 2 first-round picks. 30 starts, 21.5 sacks. He's been incredibly interesting because, the Saints look lackluster, but he's also still playing very well. And he just has continued to flash throughout his career. He had like 9 sacks last year. Again, the Saints gave up 2 firsts for him, so that's always going to be something in the back of your mind. But I'll say this. I think he could start, obviously, next to Leonard Floyd, and I think the Rams could get him for a 2023 6th and a 2025 4th. I think it's something like that where, you look at it and you're like, I'll say this right now. Marcus Davenport, if they sign him long-term, I think the guy's earned it. I don't think he's earned the 2 first-round picks, but I still think he is a good player that has been a little unfairly treated. And, the numbers do show that when he's been in there, he's a really good pressure rate for his career. But what it really comes down to is just the massive expectations. When you trade 2 first-round picks, this guy needs to be an all-pro, and he hasn't been that. So I think at the 2-5 point right now for the Saints, he's good enough to trade away and get actual assets for. So I think the Rams would be intrigued with that. I'll give it a 35% chance of happening. Not saying it's going to, but this is a guy that would fit the Rams and what they want to do. So I'd be very intrigued to have a guy like him. He'd be a rental, but I think they'd consider re-signing him after the season and giving up only a 6th this year and a 4th in 2025. It's not a bad idea. Since he's an expiring deal, he won't be as much. If he had more years on his contract, they could probably get more out of him. Next up is the edge defender from the Las Vegas Raiders, CLELIN FERRELL, who is a former 4th overall pick in 2019. Hate to say the word, but he was pretty much a bust. 25 years old. The Raiders are 2-4. They already want to trade him anyway. He's already been very much in rumors to be traded. 6'4", 265, 26 starts, 8.5 sacks. I just think this guy is extremely likely to be traded, probably the most likely out of anybody I just mentioned. And with an expiring deal, this is when the Dante Fowler stuff kind of comes up. Fowler was a third overall pick that didn't really amount to what they expected, and so the Jaguars traded him away for a third and a fifth. Now, he had actually produced a little bit. He's definitely more athletic. I think he was a better player coming out than Clelin Ferrell, but similar, top 5 picks that went oury and, go to the Rams potentially. And I think this can be the reclamation project. He doesn't need to start right away, but maybe he grooms into being a starter and then they want to bring him back. But he's 25 years old. I'm not done with him. Max Crosby was a third round pick in that same draft, and he just blew it up. And he just completely, the expectations of Ferrell then go crazy because they're like, well, we're getting this contribution out of Crosby. Why can't we get this out of our first round talent? So with what Crosby did, overshadowed him. And I think, maybe a change of scenery definitely could help him out. So I like 35% here as the chance of it happening. 2 2023 6th round picks, which you have. I don't think that'd be a bad price to pay for Ferrell as long as you can add him back on the roster next year, because I do think that this would have to be somebody that you kind of buy into and you try to, bring back and extend. Or maybe it wouldn't, but that's how I would do it. Next up is another draft crush of mine. We talked about Davenport, who I loved coming out of UTSA. Well, I love this guy coming out of Michigan. His name is Joshua Uche from Michigan, but also with the Patriots. They're 3-4. They just lost a game to the Bears that really at no point they looked like they could win. I think a 2023 6th would be enough. This is a guy that really has only gotten one career start after being a second round pick. He's 24 years old. He's signed until 2024. 4 sacks, 6'3", 245. And the Patriots just don't use him as anything more than a situational pass rusher. So I feel like this makes sense. He could start across from Leonard Floyd. The pressure rate's there. And they have the trade relationship, as I mentioned in the last video, with Bill Belichick. And I will say this, all right? Bill got a lot for a guy that they were going to cut in Sony Michel. I think he could return the favor here and give the Rams a little bit of a deal with Josh Uche. Maybe he's thrown in with Isaiah Wynn, who I think the Rams are going to end up with, but we'll see. I think either way, both would be a great addition for the Rams, and Uche would be one of those, how do we let him go to the Rams type of moves. Wouldn't necessarily push headlines on the way of, a Montez Sweat. But if Uche developed and he reached the ceiling that I believe he has, that could be even scarier, believe it or not. We move on to the next, and I give that a 40% chance of happening. The next one here, you guys know him. He's a household name. Obviously, if you're a Rams fan, St. Louis fan, if you will. Robert Quinn, the former Ram. He's now playing for the Bears. He had 18.5 sacks last year. He just, he had an unbelievable season. He is a great story coming back from the back injury that robs a lot of athletes. He continued to play at a high level between Miami, one of the highest pressure rates in the league, going to Dallas, and then going to the Chicago Bears. This is a 32-year-old that is still playing very good football. I think it would cost some because of that. I think it would cost a 2023 third and a 2024 fourth round pick. I understand he's older at 32, but he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, and he's signed until 2025. So the Rams wouldn't be able to take on that whole deal. They would need some help. I think they could get him for cheaper, but if they want, obviously some money facilitated and Ryan Poles and the Bears to take on most of the money, I think they need more picks or a larger pick to sweeten that deal, which is why I have a third this upcoming season and a fourth in 2024. He's 6'4", he's 245, great size. He's already played under Sean McVay. He's friends with Aaron Donald, so obviously this is going to make Aaron Donald happy. He's started 142 games in his career. He has 102 sacks. The Bears are winning right now, which could change this because I don't even know how they're 3-4, but they are. But at the same time, they drafted Dominique Robinson, the 5th rounder. Maybe they get him going. I mean, you want to get what you can for Robert Quinn. If you sell him high, and he's not having his best year right now, he's off to a little bit of a slow start. So if you sell him high right now, and then he goes to the Rams and he doesn't play well, you may do on that trade. So that's something to keep in mind. He is getting up there in age, not super old at 32, but still, and with the back injury previously. So the Bears might decide to do that, and I actually think there's a good chance. I have a 45% chance Robert Quinn is a Ram, according to this. Next up, a guy who I absolutely love, and if I could pick anybody on this list, it would be him, is Brian Burns. Yes, he's higher on this list than people probably expected based on the fact that there are all those news reports coming out. Adam Schefter said they were offered 2 first-round picks. The Panthers were for Brian Burns, and it didn't work out. Look, the Panthers are 2-5. They said the same thing. They were looking for 2 first-round picks for Christian McCaffrey, and that didn't happen. They took a lot less, but they still took a lot. And so, I just think at the end of the day, Fitterer right now, the GM, is trying to figure out what is going to happen with this roster. I think the one guy that is untouchable is Derek Brown, the interior defensive lineman. But I do think Brian Burns is available. I think for the right price, you can kind of lure him from the Panthers. And so he's 24. He's a Pro Bowler. He's signed until 2024. They exercise his 5th-year option. This is an opportunity after Aaron Donald. You sign him to replace Aaron Donald. He's the guy after Donald. So the Rams, it makes a lot of sense there. They have the same agent, Todd France, same agent as Aaron Donald. Brian Burns does. 42 starts in his career. He's got 30.5 sacks. I feel like Burns is I feel like he's going to be a Ram at some point. I don't know if it's necessarily at the deadline, but they've already traded away McCaffrey. I really don't think that he's untouchable, and I think the Rams can entice the Panthers to make a deal. So I give it a 45% chance. The Rams are already calling about Brian Burns, if you did not know that. A 2023 second, a 2024 first-round pick, and a 2024 fourth-round pick is how I have it for Brian Burns. I think it's going to take a lot. And this is a 24-year-old that can be a cornerstone pass rusher for years to come. It makes a lot of sense for the Rams. They'd still have a year of control, with the 5th-year option. So I think that's what they're going to, potentially do. I think they'll definitely consider it. I think they'll push. We'll see if it happens, but I have a 45% chance of Brian Burns becoming an LA Ram. I'm not sold on the fact that they can't get him. I don't buy it. We'll see. I could be wrong. The Pro Bowler, he is a Pro Bowler. He is a franchise piece. Maybe the Panthers hang on to him, but I don't see him re-signing with the Panthers. I don't see him wanting to go through a rebuild if that's what they're going to do. So with that said, I could see France getting involved, seeing how his client AD, wants a guy like that, maybe trying to get involved a little bit and forcing a trade. But either way, I'm going to say that this is a 45% chance of happening. Not quite 50-50, but I feel pretty good that if the Rams are willing to give up that much, they can acquire Brian Burns. I think the Panthers would pull the trigger on a 2nd, a 1st next year, and a 4th next year. So that's what I'll say. Moving on, we have the very likely scenario that everybody's talking about, or maybe you're not talking about it. I don't know. I've seen a lot of it. Bradley Chubb. Okay, Bradley Chubb is next. The Broncos are 2-5. They're probably going to be 2-6 after they lose to the Jaguars, which is the report. If they lose to the Jaguars, they're probably going to trade Bradley Chubb. 2023 third round pick, a 2023 sixth rounder, and running back Cam Akers, I think, is what it would take to get this done. He's a 26-year-old, a Pro Bowler. He is on an expiring deal, so the Rams would literally be in the same boat they were in with Von Miller at the end of the year. 6'4", 275, 48 career starts, 26 sacks. And, you know, this is somebody that the Broncos have been rumored to trade Chubb for a little bit now. You know, they spent the money this offseason on Randy Gregory, and they love Baron Browning, Nick Bonito. So there are definitely some guys here that lead me to believe that Peyton is just going to decide, you know what, we don't need to pay Bradley Chubb. He's going to get top dollar. We don't want to be a part of that. We like our core right now. Let's get something for him. Let's get a lot for him. Because, you know, with the way these compensatory picks are going lately, what used to be a third round pick is going to get you a late fifth round now. So that's something to keep in mind when you make a trade like that. Plus, they do need a running back. So maybe Cam Akers is involved. Maybe they don't have to tank their season. You know, they could trade Bradley Chubb and still be competitive. But regardless, I think he's very available. And I think you have defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, who, you know, was obviously the secondary coach with the Rams. I think that they would obviously have some connection there. And the Rams have familiarity with George Payton, the GM for the Broncos, because they made the Von Miller trade. They made a trade for Kenny Young. They've made multiple trades with the Broncos. And so I think at the end of the day, that relationship could be in play here. Could be easier to get a deal done by the deadline when you have a relationship like that. Guys just typically are on the same page. So I expect Les Snead to be on the phone with George Payton. And I expect that Bradley Chubb, if there's a move for a legit starting pass rusher, Bradley Chubb is going to be an LA Ram. If the Rams make a move for a legit starting pass rusher, it's going to be Bradley Chubb. I could absolutely see Brian Burns and I could see Robert Quinn. But right now, I'm going to say Bradley Chubb over those two. I'll say the one that I would prefer is Brian Burns. Bradley Chubb seems like a rental. I don't think that they would be able to compete because they still are going to have some cap issues next year. I don't know if they would be able to bring him back, and that's a lot to give up. So the good news is that a 2023 third and a sixth is just this year, and then you're done. Like, you don't have to keep paying that out. It doesn't hurt you long term, and you get Cam Akers off the roster, and it helps out the Broncos. So it is kind of a win-win deal. But if you can't bring back Bradley Chubb, then this is very much a rental. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. It's back-to-back seasons where you've rented a player for a second and a third, and then a third and a sixth, and Cam. That would be a lot to give up for rentals. So you would like to see them extend those guys like they did with, at least 1 year of Fowler, but not a guarantee. Definitely not a guarantee. So that's something to keep in mind. I have a 55% chance of this happening. 45 for Burns, 45 for Quinn. And then last but not least, I have the Rams bringing back. Yes, I said bringing back because I think this is going to happen. Okay. This is the thing that no one's talking about. That seems pretty obvious. The Rams need depth in their edge rotation, right? We all know that. They need depth in their edge rotation. They're not getting enough pressure. So who better to bring in than a Ram himself or a former Ram himself? The Rams already did this. They went out and they traded for Troy Hill, the cornerback from the Browns, in the middle of the draft for a fifth rounder. What if they just are like, you know what? Let's bring it back. Let's bring back another guy, a guy who had been there for 3 years, a guy who just played in the Super Bowl. Obanai Okoronkwo. Okoronkwo has done a decent job. He hasn't been given the reins to be a starter. So I don't think he'd be a starter. But I think when you look at what he's done in his career for the Rams, when he's healthy, he's been a good rotational piece, and he's shown you some flashes of brilliance. Unfortunately, with guys like Jerry Hughes in the mix in Houston, he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to get going. So he signed this deal, which was pretty much a prove-it deal, to have a chance to start, and he's not starting in Houston. He's not really getting a ton of playing time. So maybe he gets more with the Rams. Houston's not playing for anything at 1-4-1. I think it would take a 2023 seventh round pick, which here's the kicker, 2023 7th rounder is what the Rams are projected to get in the compensatory pick formula for Obadiah Okoronkwo and losing him. I don't think this would affect the formula. Actually, it wouldn't, because they already have it locked in. You know, we're past that point where free agency and all that can affect the formula. Again, this is a rental. He's 27 years old. He's 6'1", 253. He has 0 starts in 39 games, 4.5 sacks. Really good pressure rate for his career in a short amount of time, and a small sample size. Hasn't really been given like big reins to kind of take off. But I like the guy, and I think if you go out and you get Bradley Chubb and Obadiah Okoronkwo, you shore up your pass rush, and you have to feel good about yourself moving forward. So I give this a 70% chance of happening. I think this is a very real possibility. Okoronkwo probably expected to play more in Houston, and if they don't trade Hughes, then obviously Okoronkwo seems like the option. If they trade Hughes, maybe they keep Okoronkwo. But this just makes a lot of sense. I don't think the Rams expected to be where they're at. They drafted Daniel Hardy, expecting to get something out of him. He's been hurt all year, so they are going to need some more rotation, for that pass rush. They are going to need to improve it. And I think Okoronkwo doesn't move the needle, but he's somebody there that gives you some good added depth. And then if you get a Chubb or a Burns or a Quinn, then at that point, I think it really makes it all work out. So it's only a 7th rounder that you're going to literally be acquiring in addition to that. So the 7th rounder that essentially you're getting, you're also giving away. You're still going to end up with a 7th rounder. So I think this is kind of a no-brainer for the Rams. If he's available, I would definitely call. And I actually think it's going to happen. So I think 70% chance that Okoronkwo comes back to the Rams as a rotational depth piece that can help them. And I think there's a 55% chance they end up with Bradley Chubb, 45% chance they end up with Brian Burns, 45% chance they end up with Robert Quinn, and the next highest, but that's where we're going to cut it off, 40% chance they end up with Josh Uche. So those are the players that I have. Who do you have? Did I leave anybody out? Drop in the comments section below. But that's going to do it. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. This has been my edge rusher video on who the Rams should consider trading for and who they could consider trading for. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and let YouTube and the algorithm know that you did. And that's going to do it for me. You guys take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Later, folks.